Good evening, my lovely Virgo. This reading is for Virgo Sun, Moon, Rising, and Venus. Take a moment to relax, breathe, and open your heart. We're tuning into your love energy and what may be unfolding for you. So, as always, take what resonates and gently leave the rest. Now, let's dive into what's coming next for you. Something has changed in the atmosphere. You may not have a word for it yet. It might arrive as a feeling before it arrives as a thought, a subtle shift in the air around a particular name, a particular memory, a particular chapter of your life you thought you'd finally learn to leave alone. But something is different now. And before we go any further, before we talk about what may be moving in their direction, what may be stirring on the other side of the silence between you, I need to stay with you for a moment, with what this person put you through, with what it actually cost you back then to want someone who didn't seem to want you back. Because that cost was real, and it deserves to be acknowledged before anything else. There's a particular kind of wound that doesn't come from cruelty. Sometimes it comes from something quieter and harder to argue with: indifference, ambivalence, the experience of offering something genuine and feeling it received with less care than it deserved, of being present for someone in ways they either didn't notice or didn't choose to meet. That kind of experience leaves a specific residue. Not always the loud residue of anger, though there may have been anger, and it would have been entirely fair. More often something quieter, a question that lodged itself somewhere inside you and didn't fully dissolve even when you told yourself it had. A question that sounded something like, was I not enough? Was there something in me that made this easy for them to set aside? And even if you've done a great deal of work to answer that question, even if you know intellectually that it wasn't about your worth, there may be a part of you that still carries the echo of it, still feels in certain unguarded moments the faint imprint of what it was like to want someone's attention and find instead a kind of absence. That part of you is allowed to exist. It doesn't need to be argued out of its experience. It just needs perhaps to be seen clearly before we talk about what may be happening now. Because something may be happening now. There are people who don't understand the value of something while they have it. Not out of malice, though. That distinction doesn't always make it easier to live with. Sometimes out of a kind of blindness that's particular to comfort, to proximity, to the way certain things become invisible precisely because they're always there. And then the thing isn't there anymore. And the absence has a shape, a specific, undeniable, surprisingly loud shape, the kind that doesn't get quieter with time, or at least not in the way they expected, the kind that starts appearing in ordinary moments, uninvited, with a persistence that becomes increasingly difficult to explain away. It's possible this is what may be happening for them. Not as a certainty, not as a guarantee of anything, but as a possibility worth considering that the distance they once seemed comfortable with has started to feel from inside it less like freedom and more like something they chose without fully understanding what they were choosing. Think about who you were when they didn't want you. Not to diminish that version of yourself, but to see it clearly. You were someone who cared openly, who showed up, who may have extended more grace, more patience, more of yourself than the situation was returning. And there's a particular vulnerability in that, in being the one who wants more, who feels more, who reaches across a space that the other person isn't crossing toward you. That vulnerability takes courage, even when it doesn't feel like it. And now think about who you've been becoming since then. Maybe you've grown quieter in certain ways, more discerning about where you place your energy, more familiar with your own company, your own rhythms, your own capacity to move through the world without needing to be chosen by any particular person in order to feel like yourself. That's not a small thing. That's actually a significant thing. And it's possible, more than possible, that this shift in you is part of what's creating a shift in how they see you. Because people read energy even when they can't articulate what they're reading. And there is something in a person who has stopped quietly auditioning for someone's approval, something that registers, that lands differently, that produces in certain people a kind of attention they didn't offer before. There may be a restlessness in them that they're struggling to account for. The kind that arrives in the in-between spaces of a day, between tasks, between conversations, in the strange, suspended moment before sleep. A restlessness that has a direction to it, even if they haven't fully admitted what direction that is. It's possible they've thought about you more recently than you know. Not necessarily in ways they've acted on, not necessarily with clarity or intention or any kind of plan, but in the involuntary way that certain people surface, called up by a sound, a place, a quality of light, a phrase that belongs to a specific time and a specific closeness that doesn't have a current equivalent in their life. And when you surface for them, something may shift. Something that doesn't feel entirely comfortable. Because if it were simple, if it were just nostalgia, just a passing thought, it would pass. But there are thoughts that don't pass. There are absences that don't fill in the way you expect them to. And the longer that remains true, the harder it becomes to keep attributing it to something casual. Here is where it gets complicated, and I want to honor the complication. Because even if all of this is true, even if something is shifting in them, even if they are moving in whatever form that takes back toward you, the question that matters most isn't what they want, it's what you want. And that may be less straightforward than it sounds, because the heart doesn't always update cleanly when circumstances change. It's possible that something in you still wants them, still carries an attachment that never fully resolved, still recognizes their particular frequency in a way that bypasses your better judgment and lands somewhere more ancient and stubborn. And it's also possible that another part of you, the part that remembers, is not so sure. The part that knows what it felt like to wait, to wonder, to shape yourself around someone's inconsistency and call it love because you didn't have another word for it yet. That part may be watching this development with something other than open arms, with a wariness that has earned its place, with questions that deserve real answers before anything else is offered. There's a version of this story where their return is a gift, where the time apart created something in both of you that makes a second chapter possible in ways the first one wasn't, where they've sat with their own patterns, their own limitations, their own reasons for pulling back, and done something with that sitting, where what's moving them toward you now is something more considered than impulse, more substantial than loneliness, more honest than simply missing the comfort of your presence. That version is possible. People do change. Not all of them, not always in the ways we hope, but sometimes, genuinely, sometimes the experience of losing something clarifies what they were unable to see while they had it. And that clarity can produce a different kind of person than the one who walked away. A person who moves differently, who asks differently, who shows up with a quality of attention they didn't have before. That version of them may be approaching. And there's also a version where your own arrival at this moment is the real story, where what matters most isn't whether they come back or how or what they say when they do, but the fact that you are still here, still whole, differently whole, perhaps with edges that didn't exist before, and a deeper knowledge of what you will and won't carry for someone else again, but whole. The fact that you survived the wanting without being destroyed by it, the fact that you found somewhere in the difficulty of being set aside by someone you chose, a version of yourself that doesn't require their validation to take up space, that knows, however quietly, that what they declined to see in you was a limitation of their vision, not a limitation of your worth. That version of you is not nothing. That version of you is, in many ways, the most important thing that came out of all of this. More important, perhaps, than whatever they may or may not be running toward now. So here is how I want to leave you. Not with instructions, not with a prescription for what to do if they reach out, how to respond, whether to open a door or keep it closed. Those are decisions that belong entirely to you, to your knowing, your needs, your specific and unrepeatable sense of what this particular connection has been and what it could or couldn't become. But with this, whatever is coming, you are not the same person who was left wanting. Something in you has shifted too, in the long quiet of this time. Something has clarified, settled, taken up a steadier residence in your own skin. And if they are running towards you now, they may be running towards someone they don't entirely recognize, someone who has learned in the particular school of their absence how to stand in their own light without borrowing anyone else's. Someone who can receive what's being offered or not receive it from a place of groundedness rather than hunger. That's a different position entirely. And whatever happens next, whether this unfolds into something or passes like weather or becomes a conversation that needed to happen for reasons that have nothing to do with getting back together, you are meeting it as someone who has already done the hardest part. You stayed. You moved through it. You didn't let it make you smaller, even when it tried. And something about that, something about the quiet, unwitnessed dignity of having survived your own wanting may be the most powerful thing in the room when they finally arrive. Feel whatever this brings up. The longing and the wariness both, they can coexist. You don't have to choose between them yet. Just breathe. And remember who you've become while you were waiting. Take care, Virgo.